from the studios of the Law and Crime Trial Network in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our friends on Facebook Live. I'm Brian Ross, joined as always by my colleague Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, we begin tonight with the man called the Apostle, the leader of a worldwide church who some have likened to the late millionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Both had money and power and faced charges of trafficking young girls for their apparently insatiable sexual appetites. Rhonda?
That's right, Brian. In the case of the so-called apostle, Naasón Joaquín Garcia, he's pleaded not guilty to a range of charges brought by the California Attorney General and remains the leader of his church, which has not opened its own investigation and is sticking by a man accused of a long list of horrible crimes.
The man whose followers call him the Apostle hasn't been in one of his churches for more than 2.5 years now. Since June of 2019, Naasón Joaquín Garcia has been awaiting trial in a Los Angeles County jail, facing 23 counts of rape, sexual abuse, and the trafficking of minors, all allegedly involving young girls from his church.
He is a sexual deviant predator. This man is a predator. Parishioners, adult women, turn a blind eye because he's the apostle. Everything he does and anything you do to him, even though it seems wrong, is going to be forgiven because he is basically God on earth. That's what they preach.
The Apostle's trial is now set to begin in the spring of this year, as his defense team works to undercut the expected testimony of the Jane Does, his alleged victims.
They don't want to talk about the facts of this case. They don't want to talk about the statements from 5 victims about how they were raped by Mr. Garcia. They don't want to talk about how Miss Oaxaca and Miss, more relevantly, obviously, Miss Ocampo would bring these girls to him. They don't want to talk about these women, these girls, who have complained to the Attorney General's office about being forced to orally copulate Mr. Garcia. And they don't want to talk about the statements by the victims, Your Honor, that oral cop was forced on them. They don't want to talk about the videos with a young boy and Mr. Garcia in it, having an orgy. The young boy having sex with a member of his own family, Your Honor. They don't want to talk about that because those facts are not good for them.
The Apostle's defense team has been arguing that prosecutors helped the young women concoct a story of their abuse, and the lawyers clashed late last year over efforts to get the phone records of a former prosecutor, Amanda Plisner.
Now they just want to get personal. They knew exactly where Ms. Plisner works now, Your Honor. But they served her at her home. This was them saying, guess what? We know where you live. They did it sneakily and deceitfully.
The Light of the World Church has its international headquarters in Guadalajara, Mexico, where the Apostle once was treated as Christ on earth. But now authorities in Mexico have opened their own investigation into the alleged sex crimes, and his lawyers want to know the contacts they may have made with the former California prosecutors.
They're also trying to intimidate Mexican prosecutors. They know full well that those people could be in danger, but they do it anyway.
It got emotional.
This is very personal to me, but that the defense opposition be sealed because it does mean Mexican prosecutors, several of them, and that should not be allowed in the public domain. It also slanders Ms. Plisner, and that should not allow it to be in the public domain. Thank you.
Lead defense lawyer Alan Jackson denied any wrongdoing.
We are not seeking to harass anyone, and nothing we did was illegal.
And they have demanded to have the phones and real names of the Jane Does, the alleged young victims.
I think it's important for the court to understand the volume of information we got on the Jane Doe's phones. If you search all of Jane Doe 2's communications, the first time she ever mentions the word rape, ever, in any context that we've been able to find, is when she and another individual are concocting a story to make up a false rape allegation so that she can win her boyfriend's affections back. That is what Ms. Fusco and the AG has suggested, well, there's nothing to see here. That's not relevant material. Not only is it relevant material, it's gravy.
But in addition to the so-called Jane Does, the prosecution is counting heavily on one of the women who was initially arrested with the apostle as his recruiter, Alondra Ocampo, who has now cut a deal with the government and will testify against him at trial and then be sentenced later.
October 12th, 2022, Your Honor, and this is pursuant to an agreement that we had with the people.
Does Ocampo that agree with you?
Yes, Your Honor.
And we're joined now by the lawyer for Ms. Ocampo, Fred Thiagaraja. Mr. Thiagaraja, what is your client prepared to say about the apostle?
Yes, Brian, thank you for having me. Ms. Ocampo is prepared to testify about this entire human trafficking ring that the apostle was directed her to recruit young girls for his sexual pleasure.
And she stands by her story, no change of plans?
No, not at all. She's been committed to this course of action. She actually was committed to this course of action, even or contemplating this course of action long before a plea deal was struck, but certainly is committed to this course of action now.
And she faced a serious time behind bars. What sort of a deal has she cut in negotiations that you've had with the prosecutors?
Well, she's pled. She was facing numerous counts of a variety of different types of sexual crimes, similar to what Garcia faces now. However, she ended up pleading guilty to, I believe, 4 felonies, and she will be sentenced on October 12th of this year. And we anticipate that she will be released from custody at that point in time, serving approximately 4 years.
The power of this church is well known. Has she faced any pressure on her or her family not to testify?
Yes, but most of that. So I could kind of break it up. Prior to a plea bargain, she has been visited. In fact, prior to my representation of her, she was visited by a member of the church who didn't make overt threats, but heavily pressured her to sort of stick to the party line. And then in terms of her family, part of this process by which she is going to be testifying against the church has estranged, her family from her. They believe that she is lying, or that she is now sort of doing the devil's work, because her family is still firmly entrenched within the church. Her parents, her siblings, and especially her parents. And so it's indirect pressure, but she's losing, or the connection between her and her parents is being jeopardized by the stance that she's taking in terms of testifying against the apostle.
But she is steadfast in her decision to testify despite that sort of indirect pressure, you call it?
Yes, and by the way, this indirect pressure, and then she's also aware that the apostle and his family and his organization have threatened people in the past who've gone against them. So she is aware of the power of this so-called church and the apostle, and knows that there can be serious, sometimes dangerous consequences for opposing them. But yes, she's remaining steadfast in her decision to testify against the apostle.
All right, Fred Thiagaraja, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Keep us posted on developments.
Thank you, Brian.